YouTube and Rockfin.
Oh, Frank. Do you go by Frank or Bruno?
Franco. Yeah, I gotta change it
Franco.
so that I can just have my last name there. But yeah, I know that confuses people.
I got you.
Bruno, Franco, Frank Analysis. Yeah, it's a lot of names.
Yeah. Welcome everyone to Frank Analysis. I'm your host Franco. I'm joined here today by Ricky Rants, host of his own show called Ricky Rants, and Matt Skidmore, host of the Matt Skidmore Show. We're here today because we're following up the discussion we had last week with Ricky and Ed Lee, who's also known as DJ Elf 7, and Charles Anderson of the Lone Wolf Podcast, in which we expressed that there was some concerns that we had about Andrew Yang. Matt reached out to me. He expressed that there were some misinformation, and he felt that there were statements that were flat out not true. So we're going to discuss that here. We're going to express our disagreements and hopefully come to an understanding. So let us know. I just want to let everybody know this isn't really like a debate. It's more of a discussion. Like, I'm not here moderating between like Ricky and Matt. I'm going to be joining in and pitching in my thoughts as well. And yeah, I'm hoping we can come to an understanding here. I think we will. But yeah, go ahead, Matt. Please introduce yourself. Let everybody know what your channel is all about and what it is that you do.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Franco. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's nice to see you too, Ricky. I'm Matt Skidmore. I run the Matt Skidmore Show on YouTube. It's for those who don't know, I'm a pretty big supporter of Andrew Yang. I followed his presidential campaign back, like on the ground in Iowa and South Carolina, and New Hampshire and Nevada. So I got like a really good up close picture of like who Andrew Yang is and like what he's about. And I will say like he definitely like inspired me, I'd say, to get like really involved in politics in ways that like I hadn't before. So like I'm just a big supporter of his. And I saw like the video that came on last week on your channel, and I just felt like kind of as you referenced, like I don't know if I don't want to call it like a misinformation, because a lot of people, it's just the way politics is, like people, they hear, like you hear a lot of different things, like there's a lot of different competing narratives out there, like from different candidates and from different sides, like even among like progressives. Like you talked about us coming together. Like I would say all of us here actually have like pretty similar views. Like we're probably all like pretty anti-establishment, not down with like the Joe Bidens of the world and definitely the Donald Trumps of the world. But it's like, why? So what is it that causes like, but I'd say like so much infighting in like progressive circles? And I feel like there to be a lot of confusion between like Yang Gang and like the Bernie people and the people who support Tulsi and like everywhere. So I just thought this would be like a good opportunity to come together and have like a good discussion about it. So appreciate you having me on, Franco.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on here and reaching out. So Ricky, you can go ahead and reintroduce yourself, and this will be good for people who are tuning in for the first time, also to get to know who exactly you are. So go right ahead.
I'm Ricky Rants. I have a pretty new YouTube channel. I discuss local politics here in New York, national politics, international politics, even some conspiratorial stuff as well, things I like to question out in the world. So I have a wide variety of interests there. I'm just concerned because I am a New Yorker, and we've seen progressives run here, and we've seen progressives like even Bill de Blasio, who was, at one point this progressive champion. Turns out he wasn't so great of a mayor for us. So we've been duped before in New York. And a lot of time it's complicated in New York because New York is an old school city with old school corruption that runs really deep. So a lot of people don't know the issues of New York City, and it's always hard to predict what's going to happen here because you think one thing is going to happen, and then big money is here. We have Wall Street here. We have big tech here. We have so many sticky fingers here, and things don't end up like you think they will. And that's my problem with a lot of people running for office here, is that they get influenced very easy by big money interests.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just want to reiterate for people, like, this is not a debate. I'm not like somebody who's going to be neutral. I'm not going to be like moderating. I will pose questions since I'm hosting this show today. I will be throwing my 2 cents in, and I'm also here to hopefully learn. Like, I'm here to learn and come to an understanding with people who have different perspectives here. So I'm gonna make things clear for everybody. I'm not much of a fan for Andrew Yang, so I'm just gonna express that here before we go forward. I look forward to hopefully learning something new about Yang from Matt. Andrew Yang to me is a sellout because he showed several instances in which he'd give up his principles for political expediency. For example, his CNN gig in which he is willing to work for a corporate news network that is consistently misinforming people. His endorsement of Biden without Biden adopting any of Yang's policies. Him ignoring Tulsi Gabbard when she said she would adopt UBI after he said that he would endorse the candidate that adopts UBI. Yang supported Grace Bang as the vice chair of the DNC, who is an establishment politician. She never did anything for Yang during Yang's presidential campaign, and he endorsed her over Mel Gagarin, who supported and still supports UBI. Andrew Yang is also horrible on foreign policy. He believes in Russiagate. He gave a horrible answer on Julian Assange, who helped release evidence of U.S. war crimes. He compared BDS to Nazism, and then he backtracked and said he appreciates it, but he still supports the apartheid state of Israel. He has not shown support on ending U.S. intervention in South America or in the Middle East and Africa. So because of all these reasons, Yang has shown to side with power over humanitarianism. And these are some of the reasons why I see him being a bad choice for New York City mayor. But please, Matt, could you let us all know what you think we said in the stream that was misinformation or not true about Yang, and let us know why you support Andrew Yang.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Like, if I was hearing those things, I didn't know anything about Andrew Yang, or even if I knew even if I knew like a good amount about Andrew Yang, I'd be like, oh, that sounds terrible. Like literally me. I was talking to you about the intro to the show. I'm somebody who I despise establishment Democrats. I can't stand Republicans. I think both parties are complete trash. Like, I don't like CNN. I don't like the media. So I'm definitely not somebody who would be like, oh, I'm looking for Pete Buttigieg to be like my favorite little puppet on MSNBC or whatever channel. So you hear something like, oh, Andrew Yang, he got blacked out by the media, and then he goes on CNN right after. That sounds bad. But I think what I would say in response is, it does to me, it coming at it from Yang's perspective, he did get blacked out by the media. So what is the best thing that he could ultimately do if he wants to continue spreading his message? In a way, it's almost to become the media. And this is the key part of it that I'd say on the CNN thing. It doesn't matter so much about the fact that he's on CNN. It matters about what he says when he's actually on CNN. And he spent the entire spring of the pandemic pushing 100% over and over again. Cash relief, cash relief, cash relief. We need cash relief, cash relief, cash relief. I remember in October, 3 weeks before the presidential election, Trump was offering this $1.8, $1.9 trillion deal. And Pelosi was holding out for $2.4 trillion. And Yang was brought on CNN. They asked him what he thinks Pelosi should do. And Yang said straight up, he was like, Nancy, take this deal. This is a good deal for the American people. Stop playing politics. And he got Nancy Pelosi's daughter came out on Twitter and called him a sexist because he used Nancy's first name. So, I mean, it's if he was on CNN and he was pushing the establishment talking points and stuff like that, that would be one thing. But to me, I always felt like he was using the platform to as best he could. And I know there's other things you mentioned, the Grace Mang endorsement. That's definitely one, again, you hear it off top of your head and it sounds super fishy. You're like, what? Yang endorsed somebody who doesn't support UBI over somebody who supports UBI? Yeah, you're the UBI guy. Why would you do that? That would, as a Yang supporter, that would piss me off if that's what it was. And when I first heard DJ Elf talk about it, who was with you last week. I took the opportunity to reach out to the candidate. I forget his first name. Would you be able to remind me? Is the guy that candidate? Grace Mang endorsed against?
Mel Gagarin?
Mel Gagarin.
Yeah, I sent him a message on Twitter, and I was like, did you ever apply for the Humanity Forward endorsement? Because I know that's like the first thing you'd have to do if you want to get endorsed by Yang. You have to apply for it. And he was like, yeah, I did. And I was like, man, that's interesting. And then the one thing that I remembered is back in June, Andrew was saying around the time that members of Congress were calling him and asking him, what can I do to prevent you from endorsing my opponent? And it just so happened that right before Grace Mang received her endorsement from Andrew Yang, she came out as one of the co-sponsors for the Emergency Money for the People Act, which has still not passed Congress. It has like 50 co-sponsors, but it would have given every single American making under like $125,000 a year, $2,000 a month for the duration of the pandemic retroactively. So that was ultimately like Yang said, like around that time that people were calling him, asking what they could do to prevent him from endorsing their opponent. He says, endorse the cash relief plan. Grace Mang endorsed the cash relief plan. She gets the Yang endorsement. Is it kind of politics? Yeah, it is. I could say you could disagree with it, be like, well, Yang, ultimately at the end of the day, Mel Gregorian, or I hope I pronounced his last name right. I don't think I did.
It's kind of hard to pronounce, like
Gagarin
or something. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Gotcha. Either. Like you could disagree with that and be like, well, dude, you should always be endorsing like the person who supports UBI. But I think like given at the time, at least from Yang's perspective, he's thinking like kind of as I was saying about CNN when he was on CNN, he just kept hammering cash relief. And I know that was like his number one focus as literally like the UBI guy, like at the start of the pandemic. It felt like, at least from like a Yang supporter's perspective, myself, it felt like, wow, we just spent a year trying to convince the whole country that UBI was the right plan. And then the pandemic right after comes and it's like, this is the moment, like do UBI. So I don't know. You had like a lot of different concerns. So I'd love to try to go through like every single one by one and get Ricky's perspective as well. Cause Ricky said, like you are an actual New Yorker, like full disclosure, I'm not a New Yorker. So this matters way more. This is way more important to you than it is to me because it actually affects your day-to-day life. And like I wouldn't want to be somebody who like was trying to push some like bad option on New York City. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because that's not like what, at least personally, like that's not what I'm about when I think of politics. Like I'm always focused on like what's going to be best for the people.
Right. Yeah. So I'd just like to ask then, if he was worried about cash relief, especially emergency cash relief in the middle of a pandemic, why he wouldn't immediately endorse Bernie Sanders if he's this populist guy who is looking for, any way to help people. Bernie Sanders was the only one that was going to push the $2,000 monthly stimulus payments. Joe Biden preaches austerity. He would never do such a thing. He's not doing it now. He's not interested in doing it. What do you think was going on there? And Yang ended up giving lots of money to Joe Biden's campaign as well. We know a couple $100,000 went over to Biden. So is he playing politics? Is he helping people first, or is he helping himself first? That's my question.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. Well, there are definitely a lot of people who were disappointed when Yang endorsed Biden over Bernie Sanders. Full disclosure, I wasn't really one of those people because I was one of I mentioned to you, Franco, also like before we started this, like going into the primary, I was only like, I didn't know about Yang actually, but I was like a few months into it, I was either Tulsi or Yang. So I always came at it more from like a slightly more like maybe fiscally conservative perspective. So I disagreed with Yang on some of the more like overarching, at least in my view, that I felt like economic policies he had. And that's ultimately like one of the reasons I liked Yang. But I know that a lot of people were disappointed. And I think like the one thing Yang always said, right when Yang dropped out, he said, if somebody wants to take up like the mantle of UBI, I'll endorse you. And I know like a lot of people who supported Tulsi felt like betrayed because Yang came and he said, or at least Tulsi came out like shortly after that and had came out for like, it wasn't technically a UBI, but it was 100. It was, you'd get like 1,000 a month or whatever if you made under 100,000 a year. Like everybody would get it. But like the one responding to that before I get into Joe Biden, the one thing I would like say is Yang always said, Yang's reason specifically for dropping out was he said, I was always planning to stay in this till like at least Super Tuesday, kind of like Tulsi did. But he said, I don't think I have any path to make this. And I don't want to keep asking all of you to give me like millions of dollars when I don't think I have any reasonable chance. So I guess like from Yang's perspective, I don't think like there was ever a situation where he was then going to drop out and then endorse somebody who was polling in the same spot, or like depending which poll you looked, like maybe slightly higher or lower than him. So that's why I don't think like Tulsi ever got the endorsement. Like Tulsi and Yang are friends. I like Tulsi. I donated to her campaign. I hated the way Hillary Clinton called her like a freaking Russian asset. But the Biden thing specifically, Yang's right when he dropped out after the Biden thing, he also, the one thing he says, like, no matter what, I'm going to support the Democratic nominee because I ran to defeat Trump or whatever. Yang endorsed Biden on CNN the week after Super Tuesday. So Super Tuesday was February or March 3rd. Yang endorsed Biden on March 10th on CNN. At that point, when Yang endorsed Biden, I think the 538 meter was like 95% or like something. Like not like over 95% for Biden and like 5% for Bernie. I think like most people, even if you were a Bernie supporter, you were like, oh crap. Like I like Andrew, what his logic and what he said that night was, I think Biden's going to win. I think Biden's the Democratic nominee. So we have to beat Trump. We have to unite the party. So I'm endorsing Joe Biden. And like I get it. Like if you don't like Joe Biden, if you're suspicious of Democrats, which I am, you're still not going to like that answer. Like, but the one thing I would say in response is like, at least with Pete and Klobuchar and like Beto, the way that they did their endorsements of Biden, it was all like a show. It was all for stage. Like they had these pre-planned events and these rallies, and like all the media was there. Whereas Yang's was really like. Anderson, I remember what it was. Anderson Cooper turned to him and they were like, Yang, what are your thoughts on the race? And he's like, well, I'm going to come out right now and say I think Joe Biden is going to win, so I'm endorsing Joe Biden. So I mean, it's not going to make everybody satisfied, that answer. But that's how I saw it at the time as a Yang supporter and still see it to this day.
But doesn't that show that he's very calculating then? Like he's more concerned about getting his career. I understand he might be saying, okay, I got to get this position so that I can implement some of my policies. But as we've seen, if you try to not rock the boat with the establishment, it's just going to go their way like most of the time. So he's not really challenging power. And as far as when he's working with CNN, like he is pushing for UBI, but there is a way that UBI can be used in the advantage of capitalists. Like for example, if they use it conditionally for people, like for example, you can only get UBI if you get vaccinated, or if you do like something else, or if you make a certain amount. So, he's also not rocking the boat with foreign policy either. I don't see him challenging imperialism that much, and I see him supporting Israel, which commits a lot of human rights violations against the Palestinians. Yeah,
and on the foreign policy thing, he's definitely not the most vocal candidate. Like Tulsi, she really took that mantle, that torch of like, I want to end the wars. We need to stop interfering in all these different countries. We need to get the troops out of Syria. We need to stop bombing all these different countries. That certainly wasn't like when you went to like an Andrew Yang rally, you weren't expecting to hear like a speech about foreign policy. I don't necessarily know. Like, I guess like he definitely had the view on Assange he thought Assange should come to the U.S. and stand trial. Like he wasn't somebody who thought like Assange should just like I guess be like pardoned or something like that. But I don't know. Like I'm wondering if that gets translated into like Yang having like a hawkish foreign policy overall, because Yang was one of like the only Democratic candidates that signed the End Forever Wars pledge. And like while he didn't support a pardon for Assange, he did say that Edward Snowden should have be protected under the Whistleblower Protection Act. So like I just like I don't actually know like where, being like honest, like I don't know where you would hear like Yang would be like a war hawk or something like that, I guess.
He's not necessarily
that
much of a war hawk, but he's not willing to rock the boat against the establishment when they're committing, you know, these imperialistic actions, and imperialism's just going to continue. Now, as far as his, like when he endorsed Biden before he adopted UBI, he could have used his leverage, and I'm pretty sure you and a bunch of his other supporters would have had Andrew Yang's back. A lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters would have also had his back if he had used his leverage. He said, I will endorse Biden if he adopts UBI. If he doesn't adopt UBI, I won't endorse Joe Biden. Do you think that could have been used as leverage so that Biden could have adopted that policy?
I think it could have been. I think it would have had to been a united front from like all the progressives. Like it would have had to been like Tulsi and Yang and Bernie all
Williamson
working together.
Faction also.
Yeah, Williamson, because like I mean that was, I don't know if you guys watch Kyle Kulinski at all, or I'm sure you do.
I used
sometimes,
to.
but he called it like Bloody Monday when Pete and all them came out and endorsed Biden. Like I remember Tulsi, she posted like her brother came out and posted something on Facebook saying like Bernie never asked us to like endorse him or something like that. I don't know. I don't know if there was like, Biden clearly had all his ducks, like Obama made the calls, but it doesn't feel like that there was like the appropriate, at least on the progressive side, like, okay, we got to get all our troops in line. Like Bernie make calls to Tulsi and Yang and get it all done. I mean, in hindsight, like you look at it now, I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody's satisfied. I think people are happy Trump's gone, but you're not satisfied with Joe Biden in office. So, I mean, it stinks that, I mean, I'm not happy that Joe Biden won. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's hear from Ricky. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I think his comments about the BDS movement is, I mean, if we're talking foreign policy, and I know he's not running for president anymore, so we're more local focused now, but the BDS comment did come out this January because New York City does have strong ties with Israel, and a lot of contracts are in place. And we're talking contracts for like all kinds of technology coming into the city, transportation, healthcare. Israel's all over the city. So he made a very bold statement really early on. And I think, you know, that it's a bad sign. I don't think he needed to say that. I think you could show your support for Israel without going that far. And I think that was a misstep, in my opinion, but I don't know that it's going to hurt him that much because I don't think that a lot of New Yorkers know much about foreign policy. But I think that was a very bad move, but it's very concerning as someone who is watching and seeing what he's doing. I don't know how you feel about that statement. I don't know if you've read that piece that he wrote for forward.com, but that came out.
Yeah. January. Well, I'll give my personal view on BDS, because I mean I don't have what would be considered like a super progressive or lefty view on BDS. I am Jewish myself. Like I'm not a super religious Jew, but I mean personally this is the way I see BDS. I'm in favor of a two-state solution. I think that there should be Israel and there should be a Palestine. I don't know how that's going to work out in all the different borders and stuff like that. I'm not an expert on the issue, and I don't want to claim to be. But from what I understand, BDS doesn't necessarily actually support Israel existing as a state. It supports a one-state solution, and that one state would be Palestine. So I get what you were saying, Ricky, like he could say that without the comment that specifically I think bothered a lot of people was he said it harkened back to the boycotts of the Nazi boycotts of Jewish businesses in World War II. I know that comment specifically I think is what bothered a lot of people. I mean the way I see it, like again, not like as somebody full disclosure, I'm not like the super lefty progressive on this issue. I mean, at the end of the day, to me, it does feel like if you're going to boycott Jewish or Israeli businesses, because they work with the Israeli government, like businesses that are in Israel, it does kind of feel like I guess the way I'm looking at it, like we don't on the left we agree that like sanctions like for Iran or Iran are like bad. Like we shouldn't be sanctioning the people for like the crimes, the bad things that the government does. Like I don't know necessarily if it's the right idea to sanction like Israeli businesses that happen to do business with like the Israeli government. I mean, what you were referencing, Ricky, if it's in like military or tech, that's like a little bit different because that is like, you know, if Israel's bombing like Palestine and they shouldn't. So I don't know. It's a very complicated issue. I will say like I think Yang. I personally like with his like flip flopping the past few weeks. It's clear like yeah like I'm not gonna be like deny like he's clearly been like kind of all over the place on the BDS issue. Like he's having some trouble with it. So you would like to see him like show more consistency for sure. And I can see why that would get people upset.
With the Israeli businesses, though, it's not the same thing as the working class people of other countries. When they get sanctioned, they suffer more. But these businesses, like they're more powerful, and they're not going to be suffering as much, and they have the support of the government also. So I wouldn't equate the two.
Yeah, it's definitely you're definitely right.
Yeah.
I don't want to suggest that it's the same, but I overall I think like at the end of the day when it comes down to BDS for me, I do support. I think that there should be a two-state solution.
Okay.
And I know that Yang also thinks there should be a two-state solution. So it's just like he's not gonna. He would never like. I think the only candidate in the race that actually has said like I support BDS or at least like shown like not outright condemned BDS is actually Diane Morales, who's I'd say like the most progressive candidate in the race. Like at least, or I don't know if most progressive, but or yeah, like she would be seen as the candidate furthest to the left.
So how come we shouldn't be supporting her over Andrew Yang if she's more progressive?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like ultimately, and I was saying this in the beginning. Like I disagreed with Bernie, like on some of like the more economic stuff. Like I'm not. This is just me personally. Like I'm not all the way to the left on like different issues. Like I'll say like one, like for example, like defund the police. I think we should be defunding the police, but I think like Diane Morales, for example, she's calling for like I'd say like I just feel when I think defund the police, I think like we need to stop qualified immunity. And that's something that Yang supports. Like the NYPD spends hundreds of millions of dollars per year on defending like civil rights lawsuits against officers. Yang called it the shittiest way possible you can imagine to spend city money, like literally paying for these lawsuits for civil rights violations. Like I think obviously like the military gear, you got to get rid of that. But like, and this like some people are going to disagree with this, but like at the end of the day, I don't think that we have to have we should be sending mental health like people to when there's like somebody who has a mental health issue, not somebody with a gun. But at the end of the day, like we do need police. Like we have to have somebody to solve like crimes and lock people up who are like beating people or attacking people or like murdering people. Like so I just think like sometimes like maybe I think maybe Diane Morales goes maybe too far like in saying that like over half of like the NYPD's budget should get cut. Like that's just one example to me. Like I think Yang, one thing I really like about Yang is I think he's some people don't like this word, but I call him a pragmatic progressive. Like he's also very good, and this causes confusion, I think, like to some people on the left. He's very good at disguising progressive policies or like talking about progressive policies in like a way that appeals to moderates or conservatives. Like I'm trying to think of I mean UBI was the big one, right? He was able to convince like a lot of people that traditionally like think like the government giving like helping people like welfare or whatever is like terrible, but for whatever reason they supported UBI.
So if the police budget is cut in half, will that still be a lot for NYPD?
About $3 billion.
$3 billion? Is that still considered a lot for the police department in New York City?
I wouldn't know, like, just because I don't know the details, but I think, like, basically what I'm saying is, rather than like pick and choose like a specific number, like we need to cut 3 billion instead, like, and this, I think what Yang's approach would be, let's actually look like at each area of the department and let's figure out what's not working and what is working. If this, like, one of the things he does want to increase funding for is the anti-Asian crimes task force, which is it's a volunteer task force right now of 25 Asian American detectives who are responsible for like investigating suspected like hate crimes against Asian Americans, because that's been a big issue lately, not just in New York City but across the country. That's like one area where he does want to increase funding. I know, like, another thing he's talked about is NYPD officers currently only receive like 8 hours of something like that of de-escalation training. Like, can you imagine that? 8 hours of de-escalation training for police officers who spend like 20, 30 years in law. Like, you should be. So, like, I know, Yang, if you want to have more de-escalation training, you're going to have to throw money at that. So I like that pragmatic approach of looking at it and being like, maybe the right number is 3 billion. Maybe the right number is 1 billion. But like, let's just go through it and figure out what actually is working with the police department, which unfortunately these days isn't a lot. And then figure out what is.
Okay. So
or what isn't.
Let's talk more about then how he would be as a mayor. So Ricky, go ahead and express why do you believe that Yang won't be the best mayor for NYC?
Well, we were talking about him flip-flopping earlier, or having an unclear stance, like maybe on the BBS thing, which he kind of retracted, kind of didn't. Yang had a meeting last month with the Partnership for New York City. Now, the Partnership for New York City is where all the high-powered business leaders come together, people from BlackRock and JP Morgan and JetBlue and American Express and Pfizer and all these big companies that employ over 1 million people in New York City. And Yang made it very clear that he did not want to raise taxes on any New Yorkers. And it's very, very interesting that he says that to them in this private meeting, which 2 people confirmed that this is what he said. But in front of the camera, he's like, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to taxing the rich," but he basically told the rich to their face that they're not going to get taxed. And the tax the rich thing is a very big deal. It's a big movement going on right now in New York. People are literally marching in Albany this month. So I don't know. I think he's telling every group what they want to hear, which doesn't give me a good feeling about how he's going to lead the city.
Yeah, I guess I can see why you would feel that way. Like, there's an article that comes out in I think, what was it, the Daily News, the NY Post or whatever. I know what you're referencing, saying that he went to like this meeting with like high-powered business leaders and told them like he wouldn't raise any taxes on them. And you're thinking like, okay, Yang, well, if you're pushing for all these policies, like you want to do a basic income for New York, and you want to buy hotels and convert them into affordable housing. You wanted to have like a green housing plan for New York. All these things are going to cost money. You have to get the money for somewhere, so you got to tax the rich, right? But I think like the one thing I wasn't at the meeting. The 2 people in the meeting said the one thing. Yang obviously has plans to like tax the rich in some ways. I don't think he is. I don't think he is going to support like the higher tax bill in Albany. He was on like a forum last night, and he specifically mentioned, or like he was in a conversation on Instagram Live with somebody. He specifically mentioned like right now New York City has a 13% tax gap in terms of like income tax with Florida. And right now we have this issue where all of our people who are already paying all these taxes are already leaving the state in droves. So we can't just continue to drive up the difference. Like, if we make it even more expensive to New York, like New York is a premium location, but at some point, like if people are already leaving, I think he's trying to like play some sort of like a balance, whereas he knows he has to fund this stuff, but he's not going to try to like drive people out of New York City. He does have plans to increase I don't know if you'd call it, that's where I'd be in, like, I don't know if he's being like fancy with his words or whatever, and this is why I said I don't know. Like, I wasn't at the meeting. He says he's not going to create new taxes, but does he consider his plan to remove the property tax exemption for like MSG and CUNY? like these huge education, like James Dolan's MSG, like these corporations are getting these huge property tax exemptions. Does eliminating that exemption count as raising their tax? Like, I don't, like, that's the thing. It gets weird. But full disclosure, like, I don't think Yang would support the higher, like, the tax the rich bill that's in Albany. I know on his presidential campaign, like, he supported things like a financial transactions tax on Wall Street. He wanted a carbon tax on polluters that went up every single year, like, that you weren't following. Like, it was gonna be a $40 per ton carbon tax, and it was like every year it would go up by like $10 a ton. So it, like, if you want to see higher tax, like a lot higher taxes on New Yorkers, I don't think that Yang would be that candidate.
Yeah, I'll let you respond to that, Ricky.
Yeah, I mean, that I would agree. He's not going to support taxing the rich. So the basic income, he went from UBI, which was wildly popular on the national level, which I thought, it had its issues, but overall UBI, the idea of UBI being in the mainstream discourse is important, I think. So that's cool that he brought that to that level. Now we're looking at basic income in New York, which would be approximately $2,000 for the poorest 500,000 New Yorkers, which, okay, it's $1 billion out of our 89 billion-ish dollar budget here in New York. It's a nice gesture, but I don't think that alone is going to do a lot. I don't know I don't want to call it gimmicky because it's going to people that need it. So that's important. But a lot of times when Yang is asked about, poverty, and he's the anti-extreme poverty candidate, that's what he calls himself. He's a capitalist who's going to end extreme poverty, which, I mean, we've never seen that, but maybe, we'll see. It just doesn't seem like he has a lot more than that. It doesn't come with anything else. There's $2,000 a year, which, once inflation kicks in after all this money printing, it's not going to be much. Rents are already crazy here, right? There's no jobs guarantee attached to that. From what I've seen, I haven't seen him support the New York Health Act Medicare for All is the national scale, but New York Health Act is basically Medicare for all for New Yorkers. I haven't seen him support that. And we know bankruptcy, number one, reason people file for bankruptcy is medical debt, right? So that to me, like, supporting the New York Health Act would actually help people get out of extreme poverty even more than basic income, which, again, like, the gesture is nice, but like, if it's not attached to anything else, is it really going to do anything to poverty? I mean, especially after this past year where literally, like, if you walk down the street in my neighborhood here, Yang's neighborhood, every other business is out. They're gone. 92% of restaurants couldn't pay their rent in full in December. That report came out. Like, small businesses got crushed, and I would say it's intentional because the country let this happen all over the place. And I think it's to, I think the country has been recklessly printing dollars since the last recession, to be honest. And I think that there's something big going on that maybe the average person doesn't know. And I think things were about to collapse. So they just kind of let it kind of collapse during this pandemic. I feel like that's kind of what happened. Now they're kind of rebuilding things and acting like, oh, we're bouncing back from the pandemic, when it's really, we were reckless with our printing. We were reckless with who we gave money to and who we bailed out and who we didn't. And now we're actually destroying businesses and then rebuilding from there. So
100% right.
The problem is we have a lot of people in debt. So poverty, like, it's not about like, oh, there's a billionaire and there's a person who's living paycheck to paycheck. No, now we have billionaires and we have people who are in debt, who are literally way below zero now. And people can't wrap their brain around the math. He talks about math all the time, but he doesn't talk about the cab drivers who literally bought medallions for $1 million just to do their job. They had to take out massive loans, and the city said, you got to take out this loan if you want to drive this car. And then as soon as they got this medallion, which cost way too much money just to do their craft, which was driving cars, which they had been doing for years and years and years, all of a sudden it's, oh, now you have to give the city $3.30 for every person you pick up. Oh, and now you have to switch out your car every 5 years. Oh, and now we're going to write these we're going to sign these big contracts with Uber and Lyft.
and they're going to destroy your business. And now you used to drive all 5 boroughs. Now you have to be in Midtown and downtown. Good luck competing with each other. That's the reality of like cab drivers in New York. They got blindsided by this medallion scam. They inflated the price of these medallions, and then they let Uber and Lyft come in here and literally knock them out. So these people are literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They can't keep up with the interest coming in on their loans. They're begging for loan forgiveness from de Blasio. Nothing's going on. This has been going on for weeks, like the protests, Poverty is like a whole, like this level of poverty is like not fathomable. It's crazy. People are losing their homes at an exponential rate. People are committing suicide. Like this is crazy poverty. $2,000 a year is not going to touch this kind of poverty. This is this is unheard of. This is crazy. This is being scammed by your own city, and that's what he's walking into.
I'll let you have at it, Matt, and then I'll throw something in there. Go ahead.
So
sorry, Ricky. Go ahead and finish your thoughts. I didn't know you were.
No, I mean that's just the reality of where people are. That's just one industry, obviously, and then on top of that, these people are going to lose their jobs anyways, even though they can't even keep up with their bills. They're going to lose their jobs to driverless cars because we know New York City will be the first major smart city in America, and we know Yang envisions New York as a smart city. So he has nothing to say about the cab drivers, and that's like over 13,000 people. Those yellow cab drivers, most of which are all in massive debt. So, I don't know what his plan is there, and I think that's a huge thing that he needs to discuss immediately.
Yeah, well, I think specifically on the cab drivers thing, he did say I think 2 days ago that he thought that de Blasio's plan for the cab drivers was terrible. Like he didn't mince words about it. He was like de Blasio's plans for the taxi drivers was completely awful. But I just with most what you said about just how people are struggling and the fact that $2,000 a year, you're completely right. It's not going to be enough. It is just a start. It's something that we can do. Cause I think Yang would be the first to admit, if he could, he would love to be giving everybody $1,000 a month, or these days, $1,000 isn't enough either. So you got even more, but that's just unfortunately not something that you can do at least on the mayoral level. It's hard enough to do it on a state level. The federal government, that's what they should be giving us cash relief. They should have been giving us cash relief this entire pandemic. So I do think you're right that it's not enough. And I think Yang would be the first to say it's not enough and we got to do more. On the New York State Health Act, I have yet to seen him take a position on that. I personally would like to see him support that because it does sound like a good idea. If we need to have, you're right that, everybody knows that is a backer of Medicare for All, that bankruptcy is or medical debt's the number one cause of bankruptcy and people going poor in the United States. You should never go poor because you can't afford to pay for your health care ever. So I would love to see Yang get on that. And because I watched the thing last week. I sent a message to somebody asking what is Yang's position on this? So hopefully they will put more on that soon. In terms of the businesses, the small businesses, the 92% are shut down. One of the plans that Yang has is he wants to open a People's Bank of New York City because there's a lot of problems right now for people that don't have access to banking services. One, for example, is 13% of New Yorkers currently still receive their paychecks by going to check cashing places. And these check cashing places, they charge these exorbitant fees that nobody else has to deal with if you just have access to a bank. So Yang wants to have everybody access to a bank account. He wants to put check cashing places out of business. One of the other things that the Bank of New York would do is he wants to set aside, I forget what the exact number is off the top of my head, but it's in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to set aside to give out loans to businesses, predominantly these Black and brown owned businesses that traditional banks don't work with. He wants to target these communities that traditionally, and especially even with the PPP program and stuff like that, it's predominantly it's not going. The communities that have been hit hardest by COVID, both in terms of economics and in terms of death and sickness, has been these minority communities, and they've been getting left behind by the federal government. So I know that's something that Yang would be very passionate about with the People's Bank of New York. Another thing I know he wants to do is have micro loans, micro grants, $5,000 to $10,000 loans that you can give to and this would be again through the People's Bank of New York, that you can give to like entrepreneurs like who have just a business idea and like a plan, but nobody will work with them because they have poor credit or whatever it is. Like this is something that the People's Bank of New York. So I think like I know like you mentioned the homelessness. He's committed to cutting homelessness by half in his first term. I'll be honest. I always hate when politicians are like, we're going to cut this in half. Like people were being like, oh, Biden's going to cut child poverty in half. It's like in half. Child poverty shouldn't exist. Poverty shouldn't exist. Homelessness shouldn't exist. So I want to see Yang like you're right that he's calling himself the anti-poverty mayor. So he really does need to be like the anti-poverty mayor. I do think though, like if you just look at like the UBI, it falls short. But I think when you do look at, or not I don't want to call it a UBI. It's not a UBI. It's a basic income for $2,000 a year for 500,000 New Yorkers. I think when you look at what he does have in the rest of his platform, he knows that that's not going to be enough, not even close to enough, and you have to do much more.
Yeah, I'll just throw something in here, and then I'll let you have at it, Ricky. So we all agree here that big businesses are the main beneficiaries during the pandemic, and small businesses are suffering. Andrew Cuomo's plans for New York City in the aftermath of the pandemic is to help increase Silicon Valley's influence in that city. So Silicon Valley is going to have an influence on the city's cameras, and contact tracing, on these self-driving cars. Who does that really benefit in the end? You know, with the current system that we have, it's going to mainly benefit the corporations, and it's not going to benefit the people at all. So what would Andrew Yang even do to try to stop this? Or because it seems like he's in support of these smart cities.
He's definitely.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No. I was pretty much done.
I was gonna say he is definitely like in support of these smart, like modernizing cities, these smart cities ideas. I don't think that he would like cater to like big tech. Like one of the central themes of Andrew Yang's presidential campaign was that big tech, like these companies like Amazon and Netflix, they currently are profiting to the tune of hundreds of millions, billions of dollars a year, and they're paying $0 in federal income tax. And that's why he wanted to put a 10% value added tax on these companies so that they couldn't not pay taxes anymore. And he wanted to distribute that money like directly to people. He talked a lot about like data privacy as a property, like he wanted to, or as a property right. He wanted to have it written, like a new amendment written into the Constitution or whatever, like saying that like we have a right, like our data is property, like we own our data. Like so I don't think he would be someone that would be catering to like these big tech like interests, even though he is somebody who does want to modernize New York City, because he was always someone like, even though he recognized that like automation's like a real threat to like people like in jobs and like the workforce, like at the end of the day, like innovation and like technology and advancement, it's not like a bad thing. We want to make like people's lives easier and have when we went from the horse to the car, that's not like a bad thing. That's a great thing for like humanity. You know what I mean? Like, but like, so I'd say like, well, he's not somebody who's like opposed to like, he's going to support like modernizing cities. I think he would be creative though in the way that he doles out like these projects and like decides, like picks which partners the city's going to work with. For example, one of the things that he wants to do is he wants to have he came out with Catherine Garcia, another mayoral candidate in the race, and she had this idea to create an app, like a digital application for small businesses in the city, that it would combine all like the different permits that you can get through all the different city agencies into like one uniform place where small businesses can like go on this portal and like get their permit and be all universal. Yang and her came out, like had a press conference and like jointly agreed that that's like the way to go. And the thing that Yang added on top of it is he actually wants to do like a competition. And I get people will say it sounds gimmicky, like a competition. He wants to have a competition like where people try to design this portal, try to make this app, and like if yours is the one that they pick, that's the one like that the city would work with. Like so like I think basically when I say I think he'd be creative in the way that he doled out like these different projects. I don't think he's somebody, despite his tweets to the contrary, where he tweets at like Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, as a Yang supporter, I'm like it made me cringe. Like I'm like, really, Yang? Really? I don't I think you at the end of the day you got to look at like Yang is not he's somebody who ran on like reining in big tech in terms of like what they do with our data and not paying taxes and you know, the controlling like information and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree that modernization and improvements in our technology and advancing them, it's not a bad thing. But when the interest is in profit over community benefit, then that's when it becomes a problem. I'm gonna let Ricky talk because he hasn't said much in a while. Go ahead, Ricky.
I mean, the thing is, you know, big money is all over. Even our public housing, we have private money interests that have moved in there. You know, there used to be a path to home ownership if you lived in public housing. Now that's pretty much, you know, a lost dream for people, and people are protesting that as well. You know, if public housing is just transitional housing, so you can move on to the next, you know, money suck real estate project, like every home is just about here in New York. That's a huge problem to me. And then, you know, big tech, I don't. If we already have Uber and Lyft kind of taking over. They're going to bring in their self-driving cars. I don't think Yang has any plans to stop that. We're going to lose tons of cab drivers, the Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, yellow cab drivers, green cab drivers. That's tens of thousands of people right there. And then you know, like everything will follow. You know, what is he going to do when robotics take out 80% of the restaurant jobs? What is he going to do when there's no more Amazon delivery people because drones are bringing you know, your packages? We're talking, this is a massive changeover, and this is happening in the next 5-10 years. I just don't know what the plan is. If he's really pushing for big, you know, this smart city, which I think he envisions more than most of the candidates do. If he's really envisioning that, he needs to talk about it. You know, he needs to talk about those robot dogs that NYPD is testing out. You know, you can't be like, oh, I don't want the police to use this facial recognition technology without, you know, telling us what's going on, but then you let them roll out the robot dog. You know, if you're saying, if Andrew Yang's saying, oh, well, you need to have your COVID passport on your phone to get into certain things, who's the authority on who gets to tell people where to go based on if they've taken the vaccination or not? Like, who's behind these apps? Like, we need to have a discussion. Like, if you're going to overhaul the entire city, I need to know what you're talking about and who gets all these contracts.
Yeah, you're right. The city. Yeah, it's definitely something that he should talk about more. You're right.
Okay. Yeah. So is there Matt, is there anything else you wanted to address that you found like concerning when you were listening to the video that we did together with Ricky and Ed Lee and Charles?
I think we discussed a lot of it. Gave like I try to give my, like, the way at least I saw it as somebody who does support Yang. I know it's not gonna make not everybody's gonna agree. Like, yeah. And I was saying this to you in the beginning, Franco. Yeah. Before we got started, like, there are legitimate reasons not to like Andrew Yang. There are legitimate reasons to be like, this is not my candidate. The one thing that I always, that drives me crazy as like a Yang supporter, I don't want to, if you're not gonna like Yang, don't let it be for like these reasons that are just like blatantly untrue. Like, people will say that Andrew is like a libertarian Trojan horse who wants to like gut the social safety. It's just complete BS.
Like conspiracy theories with no evidence, right?
Yeah, like I think like you also mentioned it too before we opened. Like I was kind of asking like you like what type of like candidate are you into, and you were like, you know, like there's really not any politician these days that like that I'm into. Like because politicians suck. They do. They really suck. But I do think, this is my opinion, I think Yang is one of the good ones. I think he is. I know people aren't going to agree with him on everything. and maybe he'll disappoint me one day. Like a lot of people who have had hopes and politicians have been disappointed. But I really do believe in the guy, and I wouldn't be this passionate about him if I didn't like truly believe in him. You know what I mean? But I do appreciate just having this conversation. I appreciate the chance to talk to you, Ricky, hear about like what your perspective is as a New Yorker who is living the life in the city day to day. It's a good conversation.
Hey man, Matt, I really appreciate you coming on too. Like it's great to bring on like another perspective on here, because we can always learn something new, and it could also keep us in check. We can't be in a bubble and then, not talk to the other side. Like we have to exchange ideas and help open each other's minds. So I really appreciate you coming on instead of, just ignoring it and just dismissing it like, eh. But yeah, I really appreciate that, man. Ricky, is there anything else you wanna say?
No, this was good. It was nice chatting with you guys.
All right. So one more time, so that the audience knows, Matt, where can people find you?
So I'm the Matt Skidmore Show at Zach and Matt Show. That's how some people used to know me, my old name. You can check me out on YouTube or Twitter. And go Yang.
All right, Ricky, where can people find you?
If you see that right there, it says Ricky Rants with the exclamation point instead of an I, all one word. You can type that into Twitter or the YouTube, and you can find me there.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. This is Frank Analysis. Don't forget to stay informed.